next guest has gone from the depths of addiction to dedicating his life to helping those struggling with the disease. Please welcome the clinical director at the Hazelden Foundation, David Cohen. Good morning, David. Thanks for being here. So we just had young Cody, 21-year-old Cody, who has been sober for 17 months. When you saw his story, did you go, that was me?
I did, only 20 years later.
Right. So you've been clean now for 17 years.
Correct.
Tell us about what drove you to drugs years ago.
I don't know if there's a magic answer to that. When I was 15, a friend came over with some pot and some new CDs, and we listened to some music and smoked weed.
That was your first time? 15?
That was my first time. And from that moment on, I compulsively used marijuana. I was introduced to other drugs like pharmaceuticals, OxyContin, Dilaudid, and then eventually on my 21st birthday, I tried some heroin.
What do you think that escalator is? Because, you know, some kids just smoke marijuana and they go to college and they stop or whatever.
Yeah.
And what is it in the personality or the genetics, or where do you, as a counselor now, where do you see that?
Yeah. Well, you know, we know that marijuana affects the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of brain that affects judgment. And so the more I smoked, the more my judgment decreased. And when drugs would come in front of me, I didn't have that buffer to say, you know, perhaps this isn't a good idea.
Because you're of the school that addiction is really a disease, and that it's not something you can necessarily just overcome with willpower.
That's right.
So can you talk a little bit more about that for people who don't believe that?
Sure. You know, abusing substances doesn't always lead to the disease of addiction, but once you have the disease, you're fighting it for the rest of your life. So today, being sober for 17 years, I still consider myself a recovering addict. This is a progressive and often fatal disease that demands a lot of attention and is separate from the symptoms.
Since you have this disease, do you ever still get the urge? Do you have recurrences come back?
I don't get tempted to use, but underneath addiction lies, you know, some restlessness, irritability, and you know, there's other symptoms under addiction that I still wrestle with today.
Tell us a little bit about your transition from being in rehab to deciding you wanted to start to teach this.
Yeah, you know, I had 7 years of consecutive drug use and was an addict, and I only got hope when I got to treatment. And I realized there, through the counselors and the people in treatment, that recovery was possible, that I could live a day without using drugs. And I had not had that experience before, and I was so grateful to reconnect with self and reconnect with others, and I was very inspired by that. At the time, I was 23, I was a college dropout, and that then became my, you know, career path. I wanted to be a counselor.
Does this give you greater credibility with people going through rehab?
I think in some cases, perhaps.
What are the drugs that you're seeing come through Hazelden now?
1/3 of our patients currently are on some type of opiate, like heroin or OxyContin. You know, alcohol still is the main drug that we see people addicted to.
What advice do you give, you know, someone like Cody who's just starting out, who has, you know, it's only been several months as opposed to you who've managed to do it for, you know, years?
Yeah. You know, addiction is very isolating, and you learn not to trust yourself or anyone else. And recovery has this amazing community and rich resource of people that have been where he's been. So I would say it's important to be honest with self and others. It's important to maintain healthy boundaries and to tap into that rich community of sober people.
I'm going to take you back to something we started the show with, a quote from Mike Tyson when he was on the program, talking about the death of Philip Seymour Hoffman. Mike Tyson is just starting his recovery. Philip Seymour Hoffman was 20 years into a recovery and then relapsed and died from it. And Mike Tyson's whole point was, well, you know, what hope is there for me? What do you say to people in the program who would say exactly that?
You know, I meet people every day that that make the decision to stay sober and walk into treatment and sit in a circle and work on their issues. They are the heroes today. Recovery is possible, but it's not a curable disease. It's something that we face every single day. So there's no resting on your laurels. There's no cure. There's no what I did yesterday will help me today. It's every day I have to wake up with the decision to stay sober and make a commitment to my recovery.
And part of your decision to become clean 17 years ago had to do with the impact it had on your family, because your father called a meeting and basically said, you are out of this family if you don't get it together.
Right.
That was part of your wake-up call, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I've had, up to that point, I had countless arrests. I had hospitalizations. I was given Narcan twice. And you would think that on my 21st birthday, I was in a coma.
And tell folks what Narcan is. What does that mean?
Narcan is an antagonist that wakes you up from a heroin overdose.
Because you were in a coma, right?
Like the injection in Pulp Fiction that everybody knows, right?
Kind of. It's not quite that,
dramatic, but it's still it's a very important, it's a very severe thing to have to go through.
Let's just go and say it was just like Pulp Fiction. They just boom right in. Yeah. It didn't work though in that case, and I was in a coma for 3 days. And the point is, I used for 2 years after that, and so I had countless overdoses, hospitalizations, arrests, and none of that prevented me from using. And honestly, it wasn't until my dad called me out and said, look, you're destroying your life, and we're not going to watch that anymore. And unless you're willing to take this ticket and go to treatment, we're going to have to ask you to leave the family. I had an 8-year-old brother and a 6-year-old sister at the time, and they just couldn't see me destroy the family like that. And that stopped me in my tracks, and I took the ticket and went to treatment.
And you repaired your relationship with your dad before he passed.
I sure did.
That's wonderful. David, thank you so much for coming on. And there's a picture, too, right there, for coming on and telling us your story. And if you want more information on the Hazelden Foundation, just go to our website. We have it all there. We'll be right back.